Welcome back to Coach-to-Coach. Today's guest is Louise Cavell. Louise is a coach and author. Her business is called Cavell Coaching Conversations. In addition to one-to-one coaching, Louise also runs workshops. Louise recently published a wonderful little book called How to Be Human, Live Fully, Think Freely, and Find Joy Every Day, which is why we're here today to talk about her book. So thanks for joining us today, Louise. It's so nice to see you again.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, it's lovely to see you again, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. So the way I like to start these things is to say, what first sparked your interest in writing this book?
hmm So I previously, with my coaching and stuff, and also my day job, I guess, is occupational therapist. So I kind of wanted to sort of produce something that was kind of a mix of those.
Mm,
And I'd produced a workshop type program where it had three pillars: self-care, um, seeing how your mind works, and then sort of embrace life, go out and do it kind of thing. So
mm,
I'd written this workshop, and I thought actually, not everybody might be able to attend the workshop. It might be nice to actually put this in a book form, and I could perhaps share it, everywhere.
mm. I love it. Yeah, the I love the simplicity of those three pillars, and especially the first one, self-care. You and I were just talking before we started recording about some of your work as an occupational therapist, and I was sharing some stories about my dad. But especially as we get later on in life, it's kind of like this cumulative effect of a lack of self-care piles up on you, and when you get to those later years in life, uh, that's when that accumulation of lack of self-care can really come back to bite you in the butt, sort of thing. So yeah, like we were talking about, just the value of being active and
Mm.
getting up and down off the floor and working your major muscle groups and
Yeah,
things that
yeah,
you need that will help your quality of life uh,
yeah.
in those latter years. So
Yeah, it's so true because, like you say, time slips by, and you don't realize until, say you've got to fix something, you don't realize that you've lost like strength
mm,
in your arms,
mm,
and some people end up where they can't wash their hair because they can't keep their arms up long enough and
mm,
things like that, and just with sometimes I think people tend to, if especially if they live on their own, they start making like these meals that they get from supermarkets,
yeah,
and they're just little meals and they're not necessarily nutritious.
mm,
And that can change the way your body works with different, what you're putting in
yeah,
affects what you're sort of able to put out, kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah, so there's lots of aspects of self-care, that sleep, nutrition,
mhm,
hydration, movement, laughter, all
mm,
sorts of things that you need to include in your life every
yeah,
day.
yeah. It's funny when you say laughter. It's that I always think like things become sayings because they're often true. Laughter is the best medicine, is what
Yeah,
kind of popped into my mind there. And it's like, yeah, the just a good laugh does so many things for our physiology in terms of
oh yeah.
hormones and chemicals and things. So
Yeah, dopamine. And even like a good belly laugh
yeah,
is actually exercise because you're moving your core.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, maybe that's why I enjoy watching comedy so much.
Yeah, maybe.
So I'm
Yeah.
curious. I mean, your book, obviously, by the title, "How to Be Human," is for anyone who would fall into that category. But when you were writing it, do you have a particular set of humans in mind for who this would be the most helpful for, or how do you see your book helping people?
Yeah, well, I suppose when I initially sort of did the workshop, I suppose I was, because it's better, I think, to obviously write or work with
Mm,
something that you have your own experience about,
right.
because you're almost like an expert patient or an expert witness kind of
Mm,
thing in what you're talking about. And because I've had long-term sort of um, chronic sort of medical conditions, pain, stiffness,
Mm,
blah blah blah. And in the past I would kind of identify myself with the condition, and I'd live in the sick role, and
mm,
I'd talk about it as, I can't do this and I can't do that, and I take this medication and this and that and that, and I just at some point realized that, watch my language,
mm,
what am I taught? And I'm sort of almost perpetuating the same thing over and over by everything I'm saying and everything I'm
mm,
doing. And so I sort of realized that actually, you don't have to be like that. Obviously, I came across the three principles approach for coaching,
mm.
and actually kind of had a lot of insights myself about what I was talking myself into more
Yeah.
and more, and it's making it worse and worse. And I realized I don't have to be doing that. I don't have
Mm.
to identify with that. I can think about and do other things, which is more fun. It's
Yeah.
just depressing living like that. So yeah, it's just in a way, it's aimed at any human,
Mm.
and the way, if you notice your thinking, you've already changed.
Yeah.
But also people that do have long-term conditions. I suppose in my work, again, if I come across people, which is quite often, that really are stuck in this, that's who I am and that's how I live, I
Yeah.
try and sort of lighten it up a bit, try and bring a bit of laughter in and sort of say, well, actually, it doesn't need to be like that. Have you
Mm.
tried this? Have you spoken to this?
Yeah.
Just kind of opening people's awareness up a little bit, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. It's funny, just from what you just said, reminded me two things I love about your book. One among the many things. One is just your sharing of like your little stories and kind of very personal touches and the insights that you've had along the way, which I think is always so helpful for people to hear. And then the second thing is all your little, I don't know, I'll call them mini exercises or experiments at the end of each chapter, inviting people to do, you know, to try out these little things. I think in one part of your book, you refer to it as kind of like a 1% change. It's just, go experiment with doing something differently for the next 3 days and see what happens.
Mm,
Thing is,
mm.
I'm wondering, do you have a favorite or one that stands out to you in terms of an exercise or an experiment from the book that you like? Um,
Yeah, sorry, it's a bit sunny here, which is
uh,
not complaining. What particularly I worked with a person that mental health issues,
mm,
and they never left the house. And I sort of remember sort of saying to them, well, could you, and they wouldn't let anybody in the house either. So I said, could you just meet me at the bottom of the stairs at the
mm,
front door of the flat, and we'll just have a conversation, which she didn't do the first time, but then she did do the second time I tried it.
mm,
And then I said, well, could we just walk over to my car? I need to get a piece of paper. So I got her to walk a little bit out into the parking area.
mm,
And then we just kind of did little bits and little bits. And then I arrived, I'd got like a local map of the village that she
mm,
lived in. And I'd put like a highlighter of, this is what we've done over the last 3 weeks. Look, we've done this route.
mm,
And she was like taken aback, like, wow, I've done that.
mm,
Like, I never leave my flat.
yeah,
And so I said, so where should we go next week? And so just little by little, it just kind of broadens people's,
mm,
what they can do.
yeah,
There's so much that they can do. Um, so that was quite profound, actually, that one. I was
mm,
quite, really touched by what she'd seen with that.
yeah. There's another story that's coming to my mind from in your book. You talked about a young person whose mother went to the hospital to give birth and was gone for a couple, and it never was explained to him, and that kind of carried on it. Maybe you can recount that story.
Yeah,
I thought it was quite a touching little story.
yeah. So when I first started coaching him in the local school, when he came in, we had no eye contact.
Mm,
In fact, he's kind of sat sort of to the, wouldn't even kind of
Yeah.
face me
Okay.
kind of thing. And he was sort of very nervous and kind of closed body language, and his feet were like constantly wriggling, kind of like he was really agitated or nervous. But he told me this story, opened up to me that, yeah, his when he was 8, and
Mm,
so at this point he was like 11 or 12, but when he was 8, his mother had gone into hospital to have his baby sister, but she was gone for 2 weeks. So nobody told him what was going on.
mm,
He thought she was dying. And so it absolutely kind of affected him so drastically that so now at this point at 11 or 12, he's kind of frightened of the world,
mm,
frightened to talk to people, frightened to do things, just frightened to go into a room. It really affected him. And I just sort of said to him, but was your mother okay? Oh yes. And is your sister okay? Yes. And is your dad okay? Yes.
mm.
And are you okay? Yes. And something, I don't know what, something just clicked.
Yeah.
And yes, somehow he lost that. I don't know, because the next time that he came in, there was eye contact
Mm,
and he was facing me and he was telling me something. And then a couple of weeks later, he was telling me, well, my friend was asking me about something. And I said, well, the way you build confidence, if you just have to try things and you have to do them over and over again. And that's how you build your confidence.
mhm.
And I was like thinking, who are you? That was amazing.
That is amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
Mm.
You never know what people are gonna hear and what they're
Yeah.
gonna, you know,
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's one of the things I love so much about coaching is that, as a coach, certainly you're pointing in the direction of wanting to help people and share what you've seen for yourself. And, in the nature of the coaching that we do, it's rooted in the three principles, but like you have no idea what insight they need or how to get them that insight or whatever. But uh, somehow, almost like magic, they, just through talking and sharing and creating that um, connected, safe place for them to kind of let their shields come down
Yeah,
and all of a sudden they see something and it makes all the difference in the world for them. So that's
absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I love that in your book, you talked about the pillars. One of the pillars is understanding how your mind works. It's such a, in terms of, this being kind of like a user manual for humans. It's amazing how many of us go through life with no idea how our mind works. So maybe you can say something about that, about, what one of the key takeaways might be about learning how the mind works.
Yeah. So I think I was definitely one of those humans that didn't know how it worked.
Mm,
Well, none of us are told how it works because everybody just is doing the same thing. And but I think over time we've come away from being humans that live out in nature,
mm,
follow the seasons, follow the circadian rhythm, go to bed when it's dark, get up when it's light. We've kind of gone so far away from all of that that we don't listen to our intuition, we listen to our thoughts instead.
mm,
And because of the way media and everything is set up, it just encourages us to, compare and think and assess and we're made to be busier and busier and busier, and our what do you call it? Attention span
mm.
is minute,
Yeah,
I remember when my boys were young and they would watch these movies or and and I couldn't watch them because
mm,
I wasn't kind of somehow they were being developed with like a change of scene, change of scene, change
yeah,
of scene, change of scene. Whereas I wasn't used to that as an adult, so I found it really difficult to watch those. But obviously
mm,
I was weaning them into that, which I didn't realize.
yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, it's sad in a way that that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think when you can see how it works and that we don't have to listen to our thinking, we don't have to believe our thinking,
Mm.
and we can sort of, our thinking is trying to protect us and keep us safe, but it doesn't always help. So
Yeah.
you could sort of say, well, yeah, thanks for that, but I'm not going to use that. I'm going to wait for another idea to come to me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it can be life changing. It can be, I remember a couple of times I was really tearful because I realized that, I'd gone through difficult work situations and all sorts. Um, and I didn't need to have gone through those struggles.
Mm.
So I kind of, it really upset me. But at the same time, now you've seen it, you can't go back.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered your question, but
It had me thinking about, like the what you were saying about how us as humans, like the evolution of human society, like it's fairly recent. Like the Industrial Revolution was not all that long ago in the scale of human evolution.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it really kicked off this wave of um, getting outside of our natural rhythms and things, and the advent of things like artificial light. I've been reading a book recently called Sleep, and I forget the gentleman's name, but he was like a sleep consultant with Manchester United and the British cycling team and stuff. But
right.
the same kind of thing, like the artificial lights in buildings and things, but more recently, things like the light from our cell phones and tablets and computers
Yeah,
just further erodes and destroys our natural
yeah,
rooms, and that the light, the worst thing you can do right before bed is be on your phone.
yeah,
Because all the chemicals and things that are supposed to help you go to and get a good sleep are all thrown out of whack by the blue light from the
absolutely.
device. So yeah, it's just something to be mindful of, and particularly when you think about that pillar of self-care is
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
more in touch with our natural humanness.
That's right. And I do go, yeah, I go into the book, even as far as what we call sleep hygiene. I don't know if you've
Mm,
heard that term, but basically looking at your whole sleep thing, your
mm,
environment, the lighting, clutter, you know, make your sleeping space only for sleeping, nothing else. No TVs, no toys, no exercise machines, no. And that is difficult because obviously people live in spaces that are not always conducive to, you use your bedroom as a storeroom
yeah,
and you've got your exercise bike in there, but at least cover them up so
yeah,
that you're kind of not thinking about all of that.
yeah.
Yeah, we get into habits and then you don't sort of notice that you've got a pile of clothes over there that
Mm,
you haven't sorted through for 2 weeks or something. We're all guilty of certain things,
yeah.
and it's just sort of having oh yeah, a rethink.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much in your book, so this might be an unfair question, but if you had to boil it down to one thing that you'd want people to take away from your book, what would that one thing be?
Uh, yeah, it is difficult because obviously the one thing leads to another, but in like the pillars, in a way, because I believe that if you don't take care of the self-care first,
Mm,
then you're kind of not in a it doesn't, it's helpful to be in a more relaxed state than see your thinking and
mm,
relax and into quiet and that sort of thing.
yeah,
And then having done that, you can then go out and do life, which
mm,
is, there's so much out there. It's so brilliant.
yeah,
So it's difficult to boil it down to one thing. One thing would be, yeah, live your life, be full of joy.
mm, yeah. I love that. Not to be a spoiler alert, but I made a note at the end of your book. You had this simple yet profound kind of way of wrapping things up of be curious, be grateful, be kind, be human. And I just thought that was a wonderful way to wrap up the book and
Yeah.
captures kind of an easy recipe
Yeah.
for a good life. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
appreciate that. So if people want the book, where can they find it?
So it's currently on Amazon. It's free on Amazon Unlimited,
Hmm.
but you can buy it as well. I'm planning on getting the paperback with that as well. And then at some point, I'm going to be maybe recording excerpts of it to put onto Insight Timer, which
Hmm.
is where I'm a teacher. I do talks and meditations on there as well.
Hmm.
And I've got a website which you kindly set up for me, which
Okay.
is brilliant. And I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn as well. So look for Louise Cavell, or Louise Cavell Knighton is my full name on the book.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
CavellCoaching@gmail.com is my
Hmm.
email.
Great. Yeah. Well, I have listened to a number of your uh, recordings on Insight Timer. I can highly recommend those.
Thank you.
You do a lovely job of you know getting people. Well, when I listen to it, just getting into a nice, calm, relaxed frame of mind. So it's super helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and I wish you all the best with your book. And I know people will get a lot out of it when they do get it and read it. And I encourage people to go check it out on Amazon. So thanks again, Louise. It's been awesome.
Thank you. Good to see you, Greg.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.